Good morning. Welcome to Iron Sharpens Iron. My name is Jeremy Nettles, and I am the evangelist for the River Ridge Church of Christ that meets in Newburgh, Indiana. If you'd like to stop by and visit us, you can find us at 5600 Van Road in Newburgh. We gather at 9 a.m. on Sundays for our Bible study, and then also at 10 for our regular morning worship. We have an afternoon worship period at 4, and we also gather at the same place on Wednesday evenings at 7 for the other half of our Bible studies. We have classes for all ages, and we welcome you to join us. You can get in touch with us by phone at 812-550-6234, or you can send an email to info@riverridgechurch.org, and we would love to hear from you, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. I encourage you to check out the website found at that domain name, riverridgechurch.org, and there you can find all sorts of resources, including the articles that I write that come out every Sunday. These articles are also available in our weekly bulletin that we mail out to a number of people in the area locally, as well as, of course, making it available at our facility. You're also welcome to sign up for our correspondence course. It's just a series of 6 lessons that I can send out to you, and you complete it, send it back to me, and we can go back and forth and getting a basic idea of God's most baseline expectations of each person. And the hope is that this course will lead you to a better understanding of God's will for you and get you to make whatever changes in your life need to be made in order to line yourself up with what God expects. We have a radio show that you can tune into every Sunday afternoon at 2, and you can also check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/River Ridge Church of Christ, which hosts not only our backlog of all of these TV programs, but also the weekly live stream of our worship services and Bible studies. You can go to that channel at the times that I mentioned earlier, and you can also find that schedule on our website and elsewhere. As you come to Him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, Behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone, chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. So the honor is for you who believe, but for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling, and a rock of offense. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. I started thinking about this passage recently, and the reason was that my wife saw this on Facebook and sent it to me. And first of all, it was hilarious. Second of all, it was funny because it's true. And third of all, I thought that it might be photoshopped. And this was because it seemed like some of the colors didn't quite match up, and the shadows looked a little odd, as if the light wasn't all coming from the same direction. And it wouldn't be the first time that I saw something like that done. So I started searching just to verify, and eventually I tracked down the original. It came from Max Waugh, if I'm pronouncing that right, Max Waugh Photography. It was taken by a client of his on a photo safari in Tanzania in 2019. Now, part of the reason that I thought it had been photoshopped was that it had been enhanced into oblivion, which is all too common, unfortunately, hence my confusion, but that's another topic that's not really important. What we've got here is a baby zebra running for its life and being chased by a lioness who is very intent on eating the baby zebra. Meanwhile, the zebra herd is standing in the background looking on, and they're all together not terribly concerned about the lioness at the moment because, well, they're not the ones being targeted. And the point is basically that each member of the herd has some measure of relative safety because they are with the herd. Except for this foolish baby zebra who has decided, I don't really need the herd, and is running away. And similarly, many people profess to be Christians, but they say they don't need to be a part of the herd. Zebras make up a large part of lions' diet, and usually lions take down a zebra by hunting in packs. Now, if you were one of these lions and you were hoping to take down a zebra, then you would be conferring, without being able to communicate nearly as well as humans do, you'd be conferring with your fellow lions and lionesses and discussing how you might best go about taking down a zebra. Now, part of the trouble is that a pack of lions can easily take down a zebra, but it's really difficult for all of the lions to agree on which zebra to chase. Step 1 is to identify your target. Now, you may know that the weak and the sick, etc., are the most often caught in any predator and prey herd situation. Is this because the lions are just looking out for the overall health of the herd, and so they're culling out those who are not very good for the herd and maybe shouldn't reproduce? Nope, that's not it at all. Although that might actually seem like a pretty good strategy, that's how humans do it a lot of the time. Lions aren't humans. They're just trying to eat whatever they can. Do you think it's that lions prefer to eat the small, the sick, the injured zebra over a big, strong, healthy one with lots of meat? Well, no, that's obviously ridiculous. Do the lions chase babies and sick zebras because they're easier to catch and kill? Partially, yes. But the lions are perfectly capable of catching a nice, strong, healthy, vibrant zebra with lots and lots of meat. So why are they chasing the baby in this case? Why do they so often chase the injured or the lame or the slow or the old? Sometimes it's because they look different. It's really difficult to tell one zebra from another if they are all reasonably healthy adult zebras. But if there's one that's a different size or a different shape or has some kind of an identifying mark on it, it's pretty easy to single that one out and follow it. Now, other times, as in this instance, as it happens, it wasn't because the lions all picked on the baby, it's because this silly zebra foal didn't have the sense to stay with the herd. The herd is the defense. And partially this is because of, sharp teeth and hooves. Let's not downplay that, of course it matters, but it's also partly because of the relative anonymity. The one that stands out is going to be the first one targeted. The lions have a miserable time singling out one zebra and all chasing that same zebra, unless that zebra looks different from the rest of the herd. So how smart would it be for a zebra to ditch the herd and try to go it alone? The pattern of a zebra's coat is camouflage, but it's terrible camouflage in its environment. It stands out from miles away. In contrast, lions blend in. If you're at any distance away, you're not going to notice a lion that's trying not to be noticed. You can't really do that as a zebra. The herd is the camouflage. It's hard to tell one zebra from another. It's even hard to tell where one zebra ends and the next one begins. So it is with Christians. Just like God designed zebras to hide amongst each other and to make it harder for the lions to target one specifically, God designed Christians to be members of a body, not just disembodied hands or feet that obviously don't belong and are easily targeted. This is a problem among Christians. How does it show up? Well, it shows up in several ways, and I'll give several examples. One of them is what I tend to call the superhero complex. This is the idea that I am a Christian, I have my own relationship with God, I am strong, I know the truth, I know God, and I don't need you other people to help me. There's an element of that is sort of admirable, inasmuch as you don't need any human mediator aside from Christ himself between you and God. On the other hand, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." What, are we supposed to need that or something? Yes, of course we need that. Of course we need to be among other Christians. Of course we need to be stirred up to love and good works. We need to be encouraged. And if you're one of these people with the superhero complex, then let me just point out to you, even if you don't need it, they need it. And you're not providing it for them if you're not there. Maybe you are a superhero. Maybe you are. Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. What about those of us who aren't? We need you to stir us up and to encourage us. And you can't do that if you refuse to assemble with other Christians. There's another way that this problem shows up. It's similar to the superhero complex, but it's a distinct problem. It's not about a refusal to have fellowship with other Christians. Instead, it's the idea that I can just hang out with sinners all the time. I mean, really, that's what Jesus did, isn't it? No, actually, it's not, first of all. Also, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:33, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." Story time. I know a whole family like this. They're always thinking about how they can share Christ and demonstrate Christ's love. And that's wonderful. That's a wonderful, wonderful motivation. It's a wonderful thing to want to do. It's a wonderful thing to go out and do. It's wonderful to take risks in order to do it. At the same time, this is a family full of people who barely recognize their own need for teaching and correction and edification and encouragement, for fortification. Sadly, I watched as a congregation of Christians fell to pieces out from under this family, and the family fell to pieces as well. The individual members of the family fell to pieces. In trying to rescue others from the sinful world, they ended up doing more harm than good. And I am being very circumspect in my description of these events. There was very little actual fellowship between members of this family and members of the church they professed to belong to. They had an attitude that they could carry this burden on their own, and I've never yet seen that work out well. Now, I've also often seen this problem, or a version of it, in people of the world, including people who watch this show and write in or call or visit. They've soured on what they might call something like organized religion because of, well, reasons, and there are plenty of good reasons for them to be upset, and there are plenty of bad reasons for them to be upset too. Usually they're things like hypocrisy and judgmentality. Well, yeah, those are problems. Christians shouldn't do those things, but their answer is often to just surrender to Satan, and that doesn't work out. How did God like it when Elijah had this attitude in 1 Kings chapter 19? Now, to preface this, if we go back to chapter 17 and read verse 1, now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, that's the Israelite king at the time, "As the Lord the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." And his prediction was accurate. You can understand why this would cause some tension between Elijah and the king, and Ahab certainly was upset with Elijah, upset enough to kill him. Now, after more than 3 years of this drought, and after most of the prophets of the Lord have been persecuted and murdered by the king and his queen Jezebel, we pick up in chapter 18, verse 17, when Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." Surprisingly, Ahab complies, and God allows the prophets of Baal to humiliate themselves thoroughly, and then the fire of the Lord fell, and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God, the Lord, He is God." And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon, and slaughtered them there. So this is an incredible victory for Elijah and for the Lord, and great vindication of Elijah and his work. But chapter 19, verse 1, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them, by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. Elijah feels deflated and let down by God's people due to their foibles and their lack of devotion, in spite of the great victories that he has won. He keeps on running. He's helped on his way by God in verses 5 through 8, and then eventually he makes his way to Mount Sinai, where God had given the law to Israel through Moses, where he had organized their religious structure and their implements and edifices and their officers and their practices. And in verse 9, there he came to a cave and lodged in it, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away." And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire the sound of a low whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. So God demonstrates his power and his majesty, but he speaks softly. We already read Elijah's first response about what he's doing here, and he's about to repeat it again. Picking up in the middle of verse 13, "And behold, there came a voice to him and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?' He said, 'I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away.'" This is the same prepared speech as before. He's obviously rehearsed this. This amounts to a great frustration with the religious establishment and his desire, which he has acted out in coming to Mount Sinai, to get away from all of that and just stew in his bitterness over it. Verse 15, "And the Lord said to him, 'Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu the son of Nimshi you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat of Abel-Meholah you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.'" Do you notice that God doesn't even directly answer Elijah's complaint? He listens to him and then he just says, "Well, I've got work for you to do. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. You're not the only one serving me, despite what you might think. My people are not a lost cause, despite the bad experiences you have had. So if you proclaim to be a Christian but refuse to be a part of the church, well, I've got news for you. It doesn't work that way." Acts chapter 2. Midway through verse 47, "And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved." To the number of what? To the number of this fledgling church. If you're a Christian, if you are one of the saved, then whether you like it or not, you're part of the church. And that comes with responsibilities. If you want Christ without his church, it doesn't work that way. You can't have the one without the other. You can't have the church without Christ because the church is Christ's body. And you can't have Christ without the church because the church is Christ's body. He has one body. He has one bride, is another way that he talks about it. In fact, let's go to Ephesians chapter 4 and note how Paul talks about these things. Ephesians chapter 4, and let's read verses 4 through 7. "There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift." Are we all supposed to look exactly the same, as if we were stamped by the same cookie cutter? Well, no. The point here is that we have been given different gifts. In a sense, we are different gifts. That's what he gets into in verse 11. "And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes." Notice that these gifts are all oriented toward other people: apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers. What's the purpose? To equip the saints, not to equip themselves as individuals, but to equip each other for the work of ministry, for the work to which Christ has called his people. It's a package deal. If you want the one Lord, the one God and Father of all, then you also need the one body, the one baptism, the one Spirit, the one hope, and so on and so forth. And the purpose of it all is to build up the body, to build up the church, and to strive toward unity, as he said in verse 13. This is tied to the mature manhood, the full stature. Do you think that you have grown beyond the point where you need other Christians? Yeah, that doesn't work. That's like a 14-year-old kid saying, "I'm just too mature to fit in with all of my peers." You've probably heard some kids say that at some point, and you probably knew even then, unless you were that kid, that it was a really dumb thing to say. What does that kid need to hear? Contrary to what he expected, he needs to be told, grow up. There will always be differences between you and your peers. If you think that you're the super special one and everybody else is this bland monochrome, maybe you should take your focus off of your own belly button and pay some actual attention to the people around you. Is that too much effort? Is that too big of a burden? That's what it is to be mature, to be responsible for carrying things. Verse 15. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow, so that it builds itself up in love. None of this is a solitary exercise. Each part of the body must work together with the rest of the body in order to be working properly. A Christian is part of something far bigger than himself. Unfortunately, I've also seen this problem within the church, among simple, stable, humble, assembly-attending Christians. This happens in conjunction to the mentality that I'm going to see these people at church a couple times per week, and then I'm going to go back to my home, to my family, to my job, to my friends. Remember back in Acts chapter 2, we read something about God adding to the church those who were being saved? What did he say right before that? Verse 42. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and the prayers. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together, and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings, and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together, and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. Does that sound similar to your experience in the church? Unfortunately, it's not very common. Now, in fairness, I should impose an outer limit on this. What Luke is talking about here at the end of Acts 2 is a different circumstance from, well, what we see today for the most part. This was the very beginning of the church. Many of these new converts had no homes, they had no jobs, they had no friends, because they had come from afar, came to Jerusalem for the feasts, became Christians, and abandoned all of those things to stay where the church was. So of course things were going to change over time. They're not supposed to just continue mooching off of the richer Christians. In 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Paul reminds Christians of the example that he gave, and he tells them that they need to work for a living, that they're responsible to work with their hands, to make their own money, to earn their own wages. 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 9 through 12. Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. For that indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. But we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. He tried to commend their generosity and then also put an end to their problem, and they didn't get it. So shortly after the first letter, he writes in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, beginning in verse 7, For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, because we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with toil and labor we worked night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. It was not because we do not have that right, but to give you in ourselves an example to imitate. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command, If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we commend and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Also, it's a problem when we develop the impression that there is no difference between the assembly of the church and everyday life. For example, in 1 Corinthians 11, there were Christians who had turned the Lord's Supper into a basic social picnic lunch. And Paul asked them, do you not have houses to eat and drink in? The idea being, you should go home for that, folks. That's not what worship is about. And yes, there are difficulties in maintaining the level of fellowship that we would like to have. We're busy. We have our own families, we have kids, we have our own jobs that we have to work, we have commitments that we've made, we have habits, we have physical limitations very often. But we still have the same basic responsibility to seek and develop, to the extent that we can, fellowship, commonality, sharing. That's what fellowship means. A familiarity, togetherness with other Christians in the context of a church. It's easy to put the blame elsewhere and say, well, it's not my problem, it's those people. They're the ones who won't do what they're supposed to do. Okay, maybe, but what are you doing about it? This is a big problem. Mostly in the world, also in the church. And so this brings us back to where we started in 1 Peter chapter 2, where I would like to reread verses 4 and 5. As you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Each Christian is a living stone, carefully shaped to be a small part of a majestic structure intended to house and glorify God himself. Does that describe you? Or are you just a lonely rock, slowly wearing away in the elements, with no purpose, no matter what you'd like to think? Jesus is the cornerstone of this structure. And if you want to be joined with him, then you need to be a part of the structure with all of the other stones above you and beneath you and beside you. You're not the whole structure. You're just a very small part of it. And if you call yourself a Christian, but you're not a part of that spiritual house, well, then you're like the oddball zebra, or the one that's foolish enough to stay away from the herd. You're at far greater risk. Peter says later in the same book, chapter 5, verse 8, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." And if you're a zebra, then you stand out against the environment, one foolish Christian trying to face a hostile world alone. But Satan, the prowling lion, blends in so well you can't believe it. This is another picture that was taken in Tanzania around the same time as the other one, although on a different safari. It's pretty terrifying, isn't it? How can you deal with this? How are you going to resist the lion? That's what Peter tells us to do in the very next verse. Resist him, firm in your faith. Can you go toe-to-toe with the lion? I guarantee you that's not going to go very well. God gave us the church. Are you safely within its walls, or taking your chances as a lone zebra on the Serengeti? It's not a hopeless situation even if you are. This zebra foal in the same picture I showed you at the beginning, he actually managed to escape. How did he do it? Was it by making a triumphant stand and chewing the lion's claws off or something like that? Was it a carefully aimed hoof to the lion's eyes? Did he just keep running until the lion got tired? No. No, what happened is that the zebra ran back to the herd. Is that what you need to do? Then do it. If you're local to this area, then that could be to River Ridge. You can get in touch with us. 812-550-6234, info@riverridgechurch.org, and we would love to help. You can also reach out and we would help you to find a congregation that is near you, whatever that happens to be. One way or another, you need to go back where you belong, to the church, to Christ's body. Let us know if we can help you to do so. Thanks for joining me today on Iron Sharpens Iron.